Hey everyone, welcome again. Another Tuesday night, well, evening, and the sun's staying out longer.
I
Can still see the.
know. It makes me happy, actually.
Yeah, we needed a time change. My body is adjusting, but I like the sun being out a lot longer.
hmm Amen to
But
that.
Destiny, it's good to see you.
Likewise, Lee. Yeah, I mean, and don't take this with no any shade, but I feel like I don't miss you because I got to work with you over the weekend. So,
That's true. Yeah, we did see each other a lot this weekend, so I didn't miss you either. Not no shade. Um, but we are glad to be with everyone out there, and we're excited about this episode because we're going to be talking about interfaith work as it relates to COVID-19 and also HIV advocacy work and stuff that we really need to be talking about right now. We are still in the midst of a pandemic. People may think differently, but we are. We are still in it, and we still need to have the conversations around it. So, with that, we should just welcome our guest on.
Yeah, let's bring them on. And before I ask our guests to introduce yourselves, just, lifting up, we just celebrated 1 year of COVID. So I think this conversation is really timely and very important just to see how much has changed over the year and also to learn more about what our guests are getting into. And also to note here in Louisville, Kentucky, that we're celebrating, well, honoring, don't want to celebrate, the 1 year death of Breonna Taylor being murdered by the Louisville Police Department. So just wanted to lift that up. That happened this past Saturday, and it was nice to see so many ministry leaders in faith and through just working through their faith in action at Breonna Taylor Square. But without any further ado, I want our guests to introduce themselves. I'm so happy you are here. And Khadijah, we're going to actually ask you to go first. But I want you to, it looks like you got some words, going on in your shirt. What's going on there? What you got going on? And
you mentioned Breonna Taylor. And, within this past year, we have seen so many of us in the streets fighting for our lives, talking about Black Lives Matter. And we see people of all races and backgrounds out there in the street supporting us. But we have to understand that we are Black every day. We're going to still be Black when the cameras go away and y'all go back home to your families and your safe spaces. So I try to wear a shirt that's a constant reminder that our lives do matter. Black lives matter. We can say it, but do we actually mean it? And you bring up Breonna Taylor, and I remember, I think it was this past weekend, we were, sharing posts about her and, just remembering her life. And, it's just tragic. Can we go to bed at night without worrying about getting shot while we're sleeping? These are really real situations we have to think about. Can we go for a jog and come back home? Can we go to the corner store, our neck being stepped on? So many things we have to think about as we live here in the USA. We're supposed to be a land where we can just live freely, So, a constant reminder that Black Lives Matter, and I wear this shirt often on different lives, just in case people forgot. But yeah, that's why I have this shirt on. But back to me, my name is Khadijah. I'm the founder of Rahma, which means mercy in Arabic. And originally we started Rahma as a way to support Muslims who are HIV positive. So it's an acronym that stands for Reaching All HIV Positive Muslims in America. But we have since evolved to support all faith communities. So we do HIV work, we do female genital mutilation / cutting prevention work. We have a toolkit that we did with GW here in DC for survivors and healthcare providers. We also do work centered around sexual health and gender-based violence. And we're also the founder of National Faith HIV/AIDS Awareness Day, which started in 2017. It became officially recognized last year, yes, on HIV.gov. And we incorporate about 8 different faiths: Muslim, Sikhs, Hindus, Baha'is, Buddhist, Jewish, Hindu, Christian, and so on and so forth, and even people with spirituality backgrounds. And the goal is just to address HIV stigma in faith communities. We know it's very real. Even 40 years later, it's very, very real. People do not feel safe sometimes in the faith communities. Sometimes we have leaders who mean well, but they might say things that are ostracizing or stigmatizing, or, they're miseducated. So our goal is to really just have the conversation, support those who are positive, come as they are, with who they love, or where they come from, or their identity, or their faith. So that's what we do. Yeah, and we're based in DC. So, but we do work, we have done work across the US. We've been to Switzerland as well. That was fun going there in 2019. I'm trying to think of these dates. But, with COVID, unfortunately, it has really shut a lot of things down. And also I'm a faith ambassador with the COVID-19 Prevention Network. So is as Reverend Bertram. And, one of our goals, many goals, we have many goals. One of them is really trying to engage faith communities as well to provide accurate information about COVID-19. So members can make their own informed decisions about COVID-19. We know we have vaccine mistrust. We know we have barriers to actually getting vaccines, access to vaccines. So we're trying to navigate all these different things in our journeys. So I'm really excited to be here. Thank you for inviting me. I look forward to a very robust conversation.
And I'm, should I go ahead? Oh, so I'm Bertram Johnson. I'm a pastor in the Presbyterian Church, USA. And I'm grateful to be here with Lee and Destiny, and definitely my colleague for the COVID Prevention Network, Khadijah. And I also came to this work first through HIV. Actually right now I work as an interfaith minister at Union Theological Seminary in New York, and provide spiritual care and support for seminarians who are in their discernment process regarding a sense of call to ministry and just dealing with day-to-day life. But when I started my work with HIV, I was working as a hospital chaplain. I was being trained as a hospital chaplain in Atlanta back in the summer, I think it was '94. So I was 24 at that time, and just really young, and didn't feel like I had a lot to offer, but learned so much from, I would say men and women, but it was really primarily men, gay men who were living ostracized lives, who were facing their last days because of HIV, because of an AIDS diagnosis. There was a lot of stigmatization and fear and hatred of them. Fear and hatred combined. And many of them had felt pushed out by religious communities. I mean, this is Atlanta, it's the Bible Belt. And so there was a lot of misuse of religious texts, a lot of hate being spoken from congregations, and not just pastors and congregations, but families who would put their, primarily their sons out at that point, who were living with HIV and AIDS. And as a chaplain, I think my heart was broken by the way that people were rejected, and coming to see the ostracism that happened in God's name, in the name of a loving God, helped me as a man who was still coming into himself as a gay identified man, gave me greater compassion for that community. And so when I finished seminary, I think, well, there were ways that continued to shape me, but when I finished seminary, I moved to Seattle and was working at a church that was connected to an HIV/AIDS ministry, was involved with that as a volunteer for years, and then came on staff with that. Directed the AIDS care team program at Multi-Faith Works in Seattle for a number of years, and then went on to Fred Hutchinson Cancer Research Center to work for the HIV Vaccine Trials Network to help raise awareness about HIV prevention among communities most impacted. So Black, Latinx, definitely queer communities, trans, women, Native communities, and folks living in and around poverty. And then through that work, got involved just this last year, similar work, engaging faith communities and helping promote awareness about COVID prevention. And so that's how I've come to know Khadijah and be blessed by her friendship and her leadership.
I'm blessed to be, I'm always blessed to share faith with you, Bertram. So can't even talk about it.
We laugh a lot, so.
Have to laugh.
Yeah.
But we're very grateful for y'all to be here and the work that y'all do, and to talk about the work that y'all do. And I think it's really helpful to hear the connection of your HIV work and how that kind of organically went into the work that you're doing right now, and COVID prevention and that work. And I wonder if y'all could talk about the necessity, like why people of faith need to be having these conversations, either HIV or COVID, really, and why is that lens so important right now specifically with a national rhetoric of like misinformation and all of these things that are pretty much grounded. Some of it is grounded in faith. So I wonder why that's important.
Oh, you, Bertram.
So I will say, first of all, why it's important, because I think the faith communities as a whole, regardless of the tradition, are to be a source of healing and life and hope for people. And so much of what we've seen, and I'll talk about the last administration, was disparaging and disorienting and spreading misinformation. And in the way that a lot of religion, I don't want to say Christianity in particular, but just religion in the US is practiced, it's been co-opted by a sense of empire and aligning with entities that were not offering hope or constructive, honest, true information. And so part of the reason we do this work, especially among faith communities, is to, because by and large, COVID, not COVID, whatever is happening, faith communities are looked at in every community, whatever the tradition, as a place for hope and healing and sound information. Yeah. And so if we can work with faith leaders, regardless of the tradition, we can impact communities, because, you know, people aren't going, a lot of folks aren't going to work, haven't been going to work during COVID. Some folks are going to school. A lot of the institutions that we often take part in aren't functioning, but, you know, synagogues and mosques and churches are still meeting on a weekly basis, and sometimes, you know, multiple times of the week. And so if we can get into those spaces with information of truth that's scientifically proven, that's based out of reason and not fear, that has helpful guidelines in how to actually make productive and constructive decisions about your life, then we've done something positive, not just to impact a person, but a community as a whole. And we know that in the way that these things work, people tell people, like, if you have some good information, people will share that with someone else because they know that members of their community need it. So.
And I will also add to that, as part of the COVID network, there's about 5 or 6 of us that are faith ambassadors, and we're spread out across the U.S. And within that, we work with maybe like 5 or 6 other faith leaders within our different groups to kind of go out, and they can have sessions, whether it's like virtual via Zoom or safe social distancing in person, and kind of talk about COVID-19. Because, as you know, Reverend Bertram said, faith leaders are very trusted members of the community, and they're looked to for guidance and support. And then within faith communities, also it's supposed to be a safe space. So you're in a safe space and you're hearing from someone you respect and you honor talking to you about this is very helpful. And then we know that all faith leaders don't have all the answers. No one has all the answers, right? So we provide resources. We can bring in like scientists, we can bring in like doctors, we can bring in like public health professionals to come to these events and provide information that maybe they cannot answer. We had an event in January. It was focused on Islam. So it's called Islam, COVID-19, Vaccines, and Mistrust. And we had a very well-attended event, and we had so many questions, but it was very, very helpful because we understood where people were coming from, what their concerns were. And then we were able to have a conversation, an honest one, and really hopefully address those concerns. I think it's important because we know, especially in Black Latinx communities, we have a mistrust. We have a history on why we might not trust, obtaining vaccines or trusting pharmaceutical companies or doctors, things like that. So it's really important to talk about it. And then we've learned through these conversations that there's also barriers to actually getting the vaccine if you want it. So it's great that some of these faith community, like churches and mosques, actually can be a site to set up. Like, for example, here in my community in Virginia, the mosque that I attend, they have a health clinic. And every Saturday they're doing vaccines. They're partnering with doctors, they're partnering with health professionals. And my mom went there, got her vaccine. I'm going tomorrow to get my vaccine, not through them because it's during the week, but I'm going to get my vaccine tomorrow. And, it's important that we lead by example. And they did tell us that they don't see a lot of Black folks come and get their vaccines. And we know why that is. But having faith leaders be able to talk to the communities can be very helpful. And we had some faith leaders that experienced loss. They buried a lot of people. And they're human too, and they only can take so much. So having the support, is good. And a lot of them give out like PPE. They do food for those who are in need. They might do different things. While they're doing these different events, they can bring in COVID-19 education. And that can be a good way to disseminate the information. So.
Yeah, Bertram and Khadijah, you both lift up a couple of points that definitely have my mind spinning that I just want to reiterate before I ask my question. First of all, I want to thank you so much for doing interreligious and ecumenical work. I think it's so important. I know us at the PCOSA, we do it, but to really see it in practice and in play, and just to hear all the wonderful things that you're doing in spite of COVID-19 and a lot of the loss, and in the midst of the tri-pandemic of race, COVID-19, and poverty, you're getting a lot done. And really, like, I'm just so excited for y'all, and especially Khadijah, with the emphasis you lift up. A lot of times everything is so, and I'm Presbyterian, so I'm not knocking it, but it's so Christian focused that there isn't a lot of places for people to go if you're not a Christian, or to get the resources. So I appreciate the partnership of the interreligious community that you all have. I think it's very important and it's much needed. So I just wanted to name that. But in the work that you're doing around COVID-19 and HIV, I just wanted, I guess, you two to share more about the partnership, the interreligious partnership. I bet people are wondering and want to know more about how that works. Like, what are some of the positives that have been lifted up in doing partnership this way? I know you said you've been doing it since 2017, I believe, 2019. You got on the website, but what has that looked like? How did you start those dialogues? How did you start, communicating to be, to move outside of your bubble, to be more interreligious, and why it's so important, for us as a society to move forward, to have those interreligious dialogues, especially around, right now, COVID-19, but especially, a pandemic such as HIV that affects all of us, and why it shouldn't be stigmatized. So I just want to hear more about the community building and the coalition building aspect.
I would say, so interfaith work I've been doing before 2017, like since I was early college, but Faith Awareness Day started in 2017, which kind of became a more direct and organized focus to really engage faith communities. So, I'm Muslim, but majority of my family is Christian. Like my mom converted when I was a young girl. So I have a lot of family is Christian. So I've been exposed to that growing up. I know a lot about Christianity. But as I got older, when I was in college, I started exploring. I started going to synagogues. I would listen and to see what Rabbi was saying. I've been to churches. I would attend different masses, things like that. I wanted to learn. I think it's important that we know what's going on around, what people believe and what they're thinking, especially if we're trying to interfaith work. And a lot of times, like you said, I go to different spaces and it says it's interfaith, but I'm the only Muslim there, and it's not really Christian. It's more intrafaith than interfaith. So I always mention that when I'm there, like, hey, it's supposed to be an interfaith event. Where are the Jews, or where are the Buddhists, and different things? Because we all have a voice, we all have a seat at the table, and all of our faiths are affected by COVID for sure, and HIV and AIDS. People don't think about it. Like when we did the first Faith Awareness Day, we had a young girl from the Sikh community that was an ambassador. And after we were done, she was like, you know what? I want to start having HIV workshops and stuff at my temple. And, they didn't have it before because they didn't really think about it. Like some people think, oh, it's not, it doesn't affect our community. We don't have this going on, but it affects everybody. It doesn't discriminate, right? So I think that, and then like in the US, mostly the majority of people here have a faith that they identify with. And that if we know this, then it's important to utilize faith in a lot of work that we do. So building these relationships are very, very important. Really talking to people and understanding and learning, because it's also there's a lot of similarities between the different faiths. A lot of us believe some of the same things, So it's not like it's like a whole different thing that we're believing, because it's very, very similar. So when you find that similarity and we can identify and relate, like, oh yes, we believe that too. That's so awesome. It kind of helps to build that community and build up those different friendships. Like for example, at Rahma, again, we started out as a Muslim-led org, but now we have people on our board who are Christian, who are different faiths and people from different identities, because we understand that to reach all communities, you have to represent from all communities. So I think it's important if you're trying to reach someone like from a different faith that you might be a part of, find someone in that faith, become friends, and then they can be the one, because they're trusted, hopefully, in their community to kind of relay the message. Even with Islam, I mean, I'm Muslim, but we're so diverse. We're so diverse. And I can't go into any random community and say, hey, I'm Muslim, that's it. No, I got to build relationships too. And I got to build within those communities too, and people that actually are there. Because I mean, just because you're Muslim doesn't mean anything sometimes. You have to really build and get to know people and know what they're, because we have different cultures within our own communities. So learning the culture, learning the languages, learning what's right, what's not right, how not to be offensive is all things you have to learn and navigate. So I just keep those in mind as I do this work. But with Rahma, I started because when I was in college, I met a Muslim man living with AIDS. I was studying to be a nurse, and I was working in the hospital part-time, just, learning and different things. And, he came in and he wasn't very kind. He was like not the happiest person. I was like, oh, I don't want to be, his student nurse. I don't want to deal with this type of behavior. But of course I come into work one day and I'm assigned to him. So, I go in there and I'm like, hey, I'm here to support you. Don't be mean, all this stuff. And he kind of like just stared at me and he was looking at me like, just giving me this look. But we ended up conversing and talking, and I learned so much from him and how he didn't feel safe in his faith community, how he didn't feel welcome there, and how his faith leader didn't even know much about HIV or AIDS, so he doesn't go there anymore. And we have to come back to this. Faith is really important to a lot of people. And people lose their faith when they don't feel safe. Yeah. So we really have to look at that and see how we can build up really strong communities so people feel welcome no matter where they are in life and what they need. Because if we're not, we're going to lose people. We are losing people. So.
Have y'all seen that same kind of stigma within churches when it comes to COVID? Have you seen a similar kind of stigma along that same line as you have experienced this work? I know churches have had a weird dynamic in this because they have perpetuated a lot of misinformation. They've opened their doors when they didn't necessarily need to. So I wonder about that too. Like, how has the faith aspect really been hard to kind of navigate as well?
I'd say given the churches that we're working with and the faith leader, like we're pretty intentional in the faith leaders that we're reaching out to. And I think I will say in the work that I've done we, as Khadijah said, we each have a team of clergy consultants that we're working with to build relationship, because they're really the ones who have the relationships in the communities. But I think we're really strategic in the people that we're engaging. So we're not just talking to every church. We're talking to people who are sympathetic, who are compassionate, who are invested in their communities and will be heard and listened to, or at least have the ability to leverage relationships in their communities. And so I've definitely found some fear, some not mistrust, but some hesitation in the faith communities that I've worked with. And I'm thinking primarily in Black and Latinx communities, just because historically those communities have often been left behind. They've not been included. And then there's, just medical mistrust that's happened over the generations. So yes, you can see in the paper, you can read the stories of churches that opened up. They're like, you can't tell me whatever to do. And I mean, especially those are in states that allow that to happen also. So there's an issue between the state and the church in that case. But churches have opened up, and then, 2 weeks later, 10 members of the congregation are sick and some have died. We've not, I would say in my work, I've not really been able to reach into that community, and maybe that's not a place I've felt like I had access to. More so I've been working with congregations. I live in New York, and in the New York, New Jersey area, Khadijah and I have done some work in Philadelphia. I've done some work in DC with people who are hungry for the information. And even in that place, there's the, I wouldn't say the legacy, the ongoing issue of mistrust, because again, there were so many untruths put out at first. Remember, the last president wanted to open up churches in April, like we're going to be open for Easter last year. And I can only imagine what that would have done. So we're still trying to work with trusted, sound faith leaders who are making great work, doing great work in their communities. So
I was talking to a faith leader who's been living HIV for decades. And he was saying at the beginning of the COVID pandemic, it reminded him of the beginning of HIV. pandemic, because people didn't know, who was living with HIV, or they didn't know who has COVID. And people were looking at everybody like, with these different looks, like I might catch it from them or get it from them. I don't want to be near you because you might have COVID, so kind of like the same things he saw at the beginning of the HIV pandemic epidemic. And so he was like, it's the same exact thing. People are wearing masks, people are wearing gloves, people don't want to touch other people want to same room as people. And it kind of recycles. But we see, though, there is a stigma here because people, like, HIV has been around for decades and there still isn't a vaccine or a cure, right? But COVID, we have one. So people are like, why can't we do the same thing for HIV? People are like, why can't we do this? What is taking so long? So people have these questions and concerns too. And a lot of times people feel like, from I've heard people talking and sharing their feedback, is that people aren't as excited because it affects more Black people and brown people HIV than COVID. COVID is affecting everybody, so they have to find something. And it just shows, again, the stigma and the racism and the prejudice. I'm not saying how accurate it may not be, but these are what people are feeling and sharing. And again, another thing that we see that can be an issue, like I mentioned before, like you see people that aren't Black and brown come into Black and brown neighborhoods to get the vaccine.
Yep.
They're traveling from their areas because, and it kind of talks about privilege. Sometimes people don't even understand the privilege they have. And then the people that want it in these Black and brown neighborhoods can't get it because either it's gone or other people have came and have gotten their shots or things like that.
Yeah.
So these are things we have to think about when we navigate these spaces, and how stigma and racism and all this stuff is a continuous cycle. And it's not ending anytime soon. And we keep saying again, Black lives matter, but do they really matter?
Yeah. Well, one of the things we talked about in our staff meeting, was that yesterday? I guess it was yesterday.
Right. It was yesterday.
So much happened since then, was not just vaccine hesitancy, but also access. And not just, sort of across the U.S., that there will be, vaccination stations, a church, a community center, whatever. You can go to the armory, get your test. And Khadijah brought up the issue. There is a real issue that people from more affluent areas, primarily people of other cultures, and the work is really trying to engage folks who are most disproportionately impacted by COVID-19. So that's Black, Latinx folks, poor folks. And so folks from wealthier communities will go in, and either using social media, finding out where the vaccination stations are, they'll go, and in the process displace the members of the community who are most in need and who it was designed to engage. The other issue that we talked about was that, well, maybe if we know this is happening, if there is a vaccination place in a station in a neighborhood that's predominantly white, that we could send folks there. But then there's the issue of violence and anti-Blackness and racism, that it may not be safe for a Black person to go to a suburban community or to feel like they can go to a white church. Like, it may be safe for them, but they may not feel safe going there, because someone may call the police on them or say, well, this is only for people in this zip code, or, they place some limitation upon them. And so part of the work that we're also trying to do is address the stigmatization and the racism that happens in our community. We have to do that with health departments and make sure that they're educated in how they go about announcing. And, if you think of a lot of older folks living in and around poverty, people of color may not have a computer, may not have understanding of smartphones, or like, how do you go to the Department of Health website to figure out where there's a site? They may not be able to do that. So sometimes people will have to get on their feet, go into neighborhoods, hand out flyers, put something up if the barbershops are open, or do whatever you can, figure out how do you engage folks, because it's that important, because it's life-saving for them. And we don't want them to be excluded from this life-saving opportunity.
And then you mentioned getting there to go to the white neighborhood. Sometimes they can't get there. They don't have a car. There's not a bus that goes there. Yeah. And the one thing one of our colleagues mentioned yesterday during our meeting is that, his dad is disabled. So sometimes they might have these different vaccine sites, but they can't stand in a long line for X amount of time. So we got to think about, is this accessible for those who might need assistance? So many different things. So sometimes it might have vaccine sites, but it doesn't mean those sites are always accessible for everybody.
Yeah.
So we got to kind of keep those in mind too, as we're trying to like roll out the vaccines and, you know, get to the community.
Yeah. And so I'm also trained as a social worker. And so when you do this work, when you're trying to engage in public health work, you have to think of the whole person, the whole community. You can't just be like, okay, we opened a vaccination station in this neighborhood. Hopefully everyone will come. You have to think of what are the needs. If you're targeting, older adults who are definitely at risk, what do we need to make it safe for them? We need chairs. We need places where people can sit. As it gets warmer, bring folks in, or if it's cold outside, bring folks in. If it's too hot, give people shelter, give them water. Like some of those things that are become illegal in Georgia now. People trying to vote out, in the future. If it's too hot, you can't give them water. I mean, these are all tactics that are used, sometimes blindly, sometimes intentionally, to disenfranchise people from whatever life-saving resource they need, whether it's a vote or a vaccine. But the approaches really don't change. They just stay the same based upon the community you're in. So, and that's part of, that's not exactly our work, but it's actually expanding. It feels like our role as ambassadors, faith ambassadors for the COVID Prevention 19 network is actually expanding, because now we have to think about, it's not just having a vaccine product and people be aware of it. It's making sure that they can get to it, have a positive experience when they get there, and get home safely.
Yeah.
You two kind of hit on my question that I was going to ask. I was like, every time I would think of a question, you touch on it. I'm like, okay, question. But I think it's very important. You two named it, but just to call it out, it's a sin when faith leaders hold resources from their people, especially the marginalized community. Like a lot of these stations that you were saying previously are set up at communities of faith. And to use different stipulations that people who need the vaccine the most, that can't get access to it, is a sin. So I just want to say that. But picking up on what you were talking about and how your job is expanding, I was going to say, before the world changed into we're all digital and these virtual walls, it was hard for people to get access to information, especially people of color, poor people, and elderly. And you mentioned some of the ways that the world is shifting to access, for those people to have access to not only the vaccine, but the information for the vaccine. Like you said, it is a distrust. But what are some other, networks or people like you all who are working, because I think you mentioned you're a network of ambassadors of 5 or so across the United States, but what are some of the other resources and other creative ways, like the passing out of flyers, going door to door, and things that go past internet based, because a lot of elderly people are still shunned from their loved ones who would access the web for them. Do you know any other resources that are out there for people to connect to, especially the people in the marginalized or live in the borderlands?
Yeah, with our clergy, if we say that work with us. So there's a community event we had in Baltimore, Maryland, where it's called Day of Dignity, and it's sponsored by Islamic Relief USA. And what
Can you say that again, Khadijah?
Oh, I'm sorry. So there was a Day of Dignity, and it's sponsored by Islamic Relief USA. They do it every year, through almost every state in the U.S. every year. What they do is they give out toiletries, school supplies, food, clothing, all different things to the community. People come and they grab it. So what we're planning. So they're going to have a stage there to kind of just talk about different things. So what we were planning to do was have someone at the mic talking about COVID-19 efforts. So people are coming to get their different things. So we're going to the community. Instead of having them come to us, we're going to them. And then with the RA man we have in New York, he did the same thing. They give out hot meals, they give out different things. So people are coming for this. They're talking about COVID-19. But there are many different networks doing different things. We're not the only people definitely doing work around COVID-19. We have the White House doing work around it. I attend weekly faith partnership calls about it. And then we have the Kaiser Foundation. They released this campaign 2 weeks ago, I want to say. And it had Black doctors talking about COVID-19, encouraging our community to learn more about it. So that was just videos people could watch. But then on a faith call with the White House, there's a lot of different faith communities on that call, and they're working in their community. They're going to people, they're helping them to get the different, get the vaccine and re-educate it. So yes, you do have to go to the people. People are organizing like car rides to get them there for those who don't have access to a bus or something. So you have to be creative on the community you're in. And unfortunately, one of our coaches, he got COVID himself. He was in the ICU for a very long time. And thankfully, he's still with us. He's healing, but we understand that, none of us are immune to it. Like, it can happen to any of us. And myself, I lost 2 family members within this past year. And one of them was like 30 years old. We grew up together. We were like sisters. So it's just something that we have to keep in our mind, as we do this. But I'm thankful that there's many people doing this work, because we can't reach everyone ourselves for sure. So if we're working together to reach different communities and talk about it. And a lot of the efforts are focused in the Black and Brown communities, because we are the communities that were sorely affected by COVID-19 through so many different factors, that we need that extra support to kind of help us become aware and hopefully, make informed decisions. I even have family members right now who are refusing to get the vaccine because they think there's different things in it. And then I have some that have changed their minds and they are getting the vaccine because they understand different things, that how the importance it could be. So it's like you have to meet people where they are and really try to talk about their concerns. And don't be judgmental. Don't be aggressive, because it's not going to be helpful. Really helpful at all. So
yeah.
Thank you for naming that. I'm sorry, Lee, to cut you off, for Bertram, for your next comment. But thank you for naming that. I think it's so important. I see so many friends on social media. Well, I'm not going to go on a rant. I'm going to time myself 1 minute. Okay, that's to be. Posting like they got the vaccine, especially, my white siblings in Christ who are younger. And it's just like, one, you're posting, but you're exerting your privilege, because there's a lot of people who don't have access to it or have that judgmental mindset of like condemning you or shaming you for not wanting to go and sign up on a list and get your vaccine. Like, it's just so many polarizing ideas and thoughts around the vaccine. But so thank you for naming that people need to be understanding. They need to meet people where they are, just like any walk of life that we do for this church. You need to meet people where they are, need to educate them to help them understand why it's important to get the resources. So thank you for naming that.
No problem.
Yeah, and I've noticed it here in Tennessee that many of the rural areas out here are very hesitant about the vaccine too, but it's a very different conversation, because it's through misinformation and conspiracy and things like that. But I have seen privileged people from the city go out into these counties, go out into these other places saying, like they had extra or and all this other kinds of stuff. And so it's interesting how it manifests, but it is something that I think, the church should be speaking to, because it is so, it's just not right, for one. And it's also, it just shows how the whole vaccine distribution has just kind of been a mess. And I wonder if y'all could speak about that too, about your experience and how y'all have had conversation about the vaccine in your different faith communities, because I know it's varies so much when it comes to that, but the more we can talk about it, the better. So I wonder if the more conversations y'all have had about the vaccine in ways it could be better, really.
There's a quote that's coming to mind this isn't exactly it, but like if your revolution doesn't include the poor, it's not revolutionary. Do you know what I'm saying? Or if we know that poor people across the board are being disenfranchised from access to something that will transform their lives, if we're not actually prioritizing them and making them, centering them in what they need, then we're actually not doing the work. And so part of what we're doing with the COVID Network is, because things have evolved, it's like, what's the justice orientation? What's the faithful orientation? How do we present information in a way that's going to transform the lives of those most in need? That's really our priority. And the first rollout started, in before this new administration. And I mean, part of the other challenge I will say is that we have a flawed system in the U.S. that we don't have a federally mandated. Each state has, states' rights. They get to choose how they roll out stuff. Like, I was amazed that I grew up in Florida. I was amazed that Florida was distributing vaccines. It felt like earlier, or they had greater access before some places in New York State where I live. But that's the decision that the last administration made, because there was an alliance between those two. So I think what we really need to do is figure out what is most just, and how do we make sure that people get access. Like, I am sort of appalled that people, affluent people, will go into places where they would normally live or visit or work to get access, but they're doing what's best for them. But we also want to make sure that people who need it most have access to it, and that's the way. That's one of the ways that church and faith communities can be used to benefit this. Like, use a justice lens to offer it, but you know that not every faith community talks about justice, so that's part of the issue too.
All right, Bertram, you're not at Next Church anymore. Don't be preaching now. Don't be preaching. You're preaching.
But it's true. Destiny.
It's so true. So true.
Yeah, it has been not the most efficient rollout. We definitely will say that. And like, I know you mentioned before, Destiny, how you said you have you see young people saying they got their vaccine. It reminded me of a post I saw on my page the other day of friends of mine that are young that got their vaccine, and someone who 65 said, "How do you get your vaccine? I didn't get mine yet. I'm 65. I haven't got my vaccine yet." Yeah. And you see this, and you're like, "How did she not able to get her vaccine? What barrier is this person facing where they're able to get their vaccine and they want it?" So we kind of think about this, and the rollout and distribution. Why some people are being missed, aren't able to get an appointment? Are they waiting to get an appointment? They're never getting that appointment. So it's like, what can we do differently to make it so that everyone get their vaccine that needs it, especially in the high risk groups that like 1A and all that. I think now in Virginia we're at 1B, and I qualify for 1B, so I was able to sign up for it. But my mother, she's 65 and older. I made sure she got hers. She's had her second dose this past weekend, and and it was a beautiful thing going to that vaccine site. I mentioned as part of my mosque, they have this clinic. And we've seen folks from all faiths coming in and out of there. It was just so nice seeing that different backgrounds and ethnicities. I didn't see too many Black folks, but I did see different ethnicities and backgrounds coming in there. So it was very warming to see that. And it was very efficient. You didn't see like a long line around the building, and they had like just a really efficient process. And they made you sit for about 15 minutes or so afterwards to make sure that it had any reactions. And I monitored my mother, of course, make sure she was good, and she had Tylenol on standby. But it was just really heartwarming to see that people of different faiths were in this clinic run by started from a mosque. Yeah. And they're all trying to help people of different faiths. So I think this is an example of working together as an interfaith kind of initiative. But yeah, I think definitely there is a way to make it more efficient. And I know that President Biden mentioned that, May 1st, everyone will be able to get the vaccine. So I'm wondering now, how's that going to work? Because everybody's going to get it. So how is this rollout going to happen to make it efficient so that people can get it and, they won't be missed? So I look forward to seeing how that is. And hopefully we have taken some lessons learned from these past few months and how it went out, and see what we can make difference and how we can adjust it to make it more efficient in the future.
Yeah. Yeah, I just think the system in the U.S. isn't designed for. We've never had this experience, and right. we've never tried to reach every person living in the U.S. With resources for public health, and hopefully this will give us some guidance for a very soon future where we can make some standardized processes across the nation, so that what's happening in Mississippi is as good as what's happening in Pennsylvania. And there's not disparity based upon which state you're in, whether blue or how you voted or whatever. But there's a national policy where everyone has access.
Do you think that's possible? Do you think? I
believe it's possible. I don't know if we have the political will to do it.
Okay. Yeah. And that might be what I meant. Yeah.
And I think that's another way that, faith communities that are invested in not just what happens in their four walls or in their zip code can invest their lives in the health and well-being of all people who may not even look like them or think like them or talk about God in the way they do, or maybe not talk about God at all, but also see them as beloved and created in God's image and want the best for them in the same way that they do for their children who reflect their image. So that's just me. So
yeah, and I talked to a friend who was in the UK where they have a national healthcare system, and it's just a whole different orientation about thinking about health and thinking about, you're kind of all in this together in some ways. Now they have their own disparities and things like that, but I do think it is it's an American ideal where there is this, states' rights and I wonder if it's because we just we've never really had to deal with a massive, we never had to have a war here. We never had to have or unless it's the Civil War. But I think I just think that this country is not equipped for anything that is in some way a common communal understanding of being.
Yeah, we don't think as a group. We think as individual bodies. And I mean, the Electoral College. Y'all got me talking about everything. The Electoral College,
Welcome to Just Talk Live.
It's all connected. It's all connected.
Right. No, but it is because, we see our neighboring states as not enemies, but we're I guess maybe in some ways we do see them as enemies. And what's happening in Virginia versus West Virginia, well, we should have what they have, or we don't want them to have too much. And I think that sense of American individualism, which is, touted throughout a lot of our Christian communities, and I'll definitely claim, Christianity is a problem as a source for that. We need to amend our theology and our public service to reflect a faith that believes in a more a God that cares for all people, and that's not where we are right now. So.
Well, we're getting close to the 10-minute mark. So I'm just going to ask you two. Well, first, thank you so much for being here. Lee and I have enjoyed this conversation. At least I have. Again, I won't speak for Lee, but I've enjoyed this conversation. And it was very enriching. And I actually learned a couple of things I didn't know. So thank you for that. But I just wanted to take this time for you two to lift up any resources, any final thoughts or messages, and also maybe to talk about if there's ways that congregations or other faith entities want to get involved in equipping their communities. What can they do? What resources are out there? Who can they get in contact with?
Yeah, I think a good
site. And any final other words that you might have?
Well, first of all, thank you for having me as well. I enjoyed our conversation also, and having dialogue I think is very important. And to learn more about the COVID-19 Prevention Network, you can go to preventcovid.org. And it has a lot of information there about the work that we're doing, how you can get involved. And if you want one of our ambassadors or, doctors or scientists for the network to come to your congregation, whether it's virtually, we can, and you have questions that I can't answer, contact us. And we are more than happy to help put together a discussion, based on your community. We have different languages we can cater to as well, not just English. So you have another language you want to have an event, completely fine. We can do that. If you're interested in doing work with HIV and AIDS and faith communities, check out faithaidsday.com and habrahma.org to see more about our work. But yeah, the first step is just education and knowledge. And I know we're announcing it. We have so many different news articles coming out and so many, doctors that we meet in the barbershop. People that say that they talk about what they know, but they might not have the right information. So it's we have so much information coming at us and trying to figure out how we can navigate it and figure out what's actually correct and up to date. So again, we have these resources here that are accurate and scientifically backed. that we can share with you if you need that information as you navigate these conversations with your communities. You know, we're all in this together. We only can end COVID together. So let's do the work together.
Yeah. So in addition to the resources that Khadijah mentioned, if you go to YouTube, if you're on the computer, you can get to YouTube. Go to, is it preventcovid.org? There's a page there. And there's, I'm trying to remember. I should have looked it up before we came on. But there is a series that's sponsored by, so the COVID Prevention Network is actually funded through the National Institute of Allergies and Infectious Diseases, which is under NIH, and everybody knows Dr. Fauci. So we're in that line. And so the researchers, the doctors, the scientists that we work with are all highly intelligent, highly capable folks. As Khadijah said, we don't just speak in English. We have folks who speak in Spanish. A few weeks ago, I sponsored a help facilitate a conversation, an event. I didn't do the conversation. It was the first all Spanish-speaking COVID event that I'd done, working with a colleague, a Presbyterian pastor, Reverend Amari Tanyan Santos, and Victor Aloyo out of New York, New Jersey. It was great to do that. I mean, I gave them resources, connect them with the doctors to make that happen. But if there are ways that we can target a message to your community, that community had a lot of folks who are not born in the U.S. and are in the U.S. without documentation. And, you know, how do we care for that community? Because we know that there's fear around immigration issues, and how do we present information to them in ways that make them feel safe and make sure that they get what they need. But I was going to say on the YouTube, I think it's Prevent COVID is you can subscribe to
this pandemic is not.
That's where she is. It's but there are a number of videos there. Some are targeting. There's one called Pandemia. It's a series that's targeting the Spanish-speaking community, and one called COVID in Black, which is primarily for African Americans. It's open for anyone, but it's all Black researchers, doctors, and speakers. And then there's a wealth of information that can be shared by any faith community. Just go to the link. If you feel like this would be enhancing or enriching to your community, just send them the link. You know, it could go out in a weekly email or whatever it is. And that would be one way for people who are maybe not savvy with social media, but they can go online, click on a link, and learn something about COVID. The other thing that you can do, Khadijah, we could share, I don't know if there's a way to put our email addresses up, but you can reach out to me at Bertram at justiceassociates.org. And Khadijah?
It's Khadijah, KHADIJAH at haverahma.org.
And how do you spell Rahma?
HAVERAHMA.org.
So,
and then there were some other resources too that I wanted to mention, like Black AIDS Institute has COVID-19 resources. Treatment Action Group, of course, the CDC has toolkits. They actually have something from the Asian and Pacific Islander Health Forum. They have resources. Urban Indian Health. And then again, I mentioned before, the Kaiser Foundation, they released the Black Doctors. It's called Between Us, About Us. I'll share the link here actually, so you can just see it if you want to share it with viewers. But it has we'll remove the whole UTM source, all that part. But that shows the conversation. And then if you go to the COVID-19 Enrichment Network Facebook page, you can see all the different videos we've done in the past. I used to have a series called Iman and COVID, which means faith in Arabic. And then we have reflections from the Muslim community. I did like 6 episodes, and I was like, okay, this is too much. I'm gonna do this every week. So I had to.
But I will say, you were reaching thousands of people with your web series, right? So
yeah, we did. I reached a lot of people. We did StreamYard too, so we're able to like also do it. We're streaming on different pages at one time. So I actually had some leaders that had like lots of followers that was streaming on their page too, and it really helped with the engagement. And the comments.
You were international. You were like across the continent.
I don't know about all that. But no.
You were.
What are you talking about?
Reaching the masses.
She is. She's amazing. Y'all don't know how amazing Khadijah is.
Is this the correct web address? If we wanted
that
to
works. Or you can just prevent COVID. It's just
okay.
Yeah. When I typed in what Bertram told me type in, I think it was like a landing page and it went to this. So
yeah,
they have a short URL and they have the long URL. So either of them works.
We'll keep this up here a little while just in case people want to copy it down.
And I'll say if there's a faith community or anyone in the community who wants a researcher, someone who can speak to the needs of your community to come forward, we're happy to arrange those for you. It doesn't matter how big or small. This is part of the work while we're here. And so if it's just like a group of 10 or 15 folks, or a congregation of 300 or 500 or whatever, this is why we're available. So reach out to us through our emails, and we'd be happy to respond. And this is all, there's no charge also for this work. This is all free of charge for the country.
Awesome. Well, I'm gonna throw out one more question,
Okay.
just to end on. I wonder if I don't know, just to end on somewhat hopeful. I wonder if you could offer like some form of hope out there. I know people are seeing the light at the end of the tunnel a little bit, but what would you leave people with to bring a little bit of hope to us?
Okay, well, I'll start. A lot of us, we've lost people during this pandemic, or we know someone that knows somebody, or we know somebody that knows someone that lost someone during COVID-19. And for those of us of faith, it could have tested our faith. We're like, okay, like people of faith, like, why is this happening? Like, a lot of us are in the house for a year now. We're facing mental health issues and depression, might have lost our jobs, might not have food on the table, or have to go out and be exposed to possibly contracting COVID, the work that we do. And, a lot of these are a lot of adversities and, things that can be difficult to navigate. But one thing I will say is that if you're watching this and you're here, that is something I am thankful for myself. I can't say what you can be thankful for, but I'm thankful for that I'm here and that, I'm able to have survived this pandemic. Like I said, I lost my cousin. And for me, that was really, really hard. I became very depressed. I gained like 20 pounds. I was eating brownies and ice cream and just like on the couch and watching Netflix because, this is sometimes how we mourn. There's no right way to mourn. And it really opened my eyes to, because when I first started, you asked me a year ago, I said, I ain't taking no vaccine. You know what happened in our history? I don't trust that. But as I educated myself and I learned more and I listened to scientists and doctors and read information that, kind of made sense to me. And then I have people that close to me that passed away. It really opened my eyes to this. And I know that we are a very resilient species. We are very powerful and we will overcome this. We've survived so many different pandemics throughout our history of existence. And we're still here, we're still growing and multiplying. There's billions of us in this world. So it shows that we will get through this, we will make it. And I remember watching this commercial in the beginning of the pandemic where it showed like really older people who were alive back when there was the outbreak of different, I can't remember what it was that had outbreak back then, but it showed that they're here now and they're saying you can get through this.
Yeah. Was it the Spanish flu?
Yeah, I think so. It was a flu. Yeah. And like, you can get through this. You can do this. We made it. And it kind of was very inspiring for me. And that back then they didn't have TVs and the internet and all these luxuries we have. And they made do. I saw a picture of kids listening to a radio to get their instruction from the teacher. We have kids that have computer access that can see their teacher on a Zoom call. And so we do have so much. I'm not going to talk about how kids are affected. A lot of kids can't deal with the Zoom call. They don't have access to Zoom calls, or there might be the cases of abuse have gone up, unfortunately, throughout this time. But the point is that we will get through this. We've done it before and probably do it again sometime in the future, but we're very educated and we're learning, and we will survive this. Just keep trucking on, keep social distancing, keep following the guidelines, wear your mask. If you're able to, get a vaccine, because only together we can do it. So let's do it together.
Mm-hmm. And maybe before I get to the hope part, I'll stick with the truth or the reality is that I don't think we're not out of this anytime soon. I mean, I don't know how things will shift before the end of this year, honestly. I think we'll make some progress, but it's still dependent upon how folks access vaccines and stay adherent to the protocol and receiving it. And so I do encourage people to get vaccinated. And if they have questions, reach out to us and we will do our best to connect you to someone who can give you more information. We're not scientists, but we're here to promote science. But I will say that the thing that we can do for each other is practice compassion, that we can be thoughtful in how we regard not just the needs of others, but be compassionate for ourselves. I see a lot of friends who are parents who are really struggling right now. People who had their own careers and are now, a teacher, homeschooling, multiple kids at the same time, or not homeschool, but helping them with their homework. And family life is stressed. Financially, people are stressed. I think people are depressed. I'm counseling students at the seminary. I know that folks are dealing with Zoom fatigue, and not just Zoom fatigue, but the fatigue of the pandemic is taking its toll. So if there are ways that you can practice self-care and compassion and not feel shamed about it, just say like, I'm having a hard time, go to your closest friends, let them know that, I need some support right now, or I just need you to I don't know, babysit my kids for an hour while I do something else, or let me just be in the other room for a bit. That really means a lot. And that's one of the ways, like Khadijah talked about, us getting through this together. Those are some of the ways that we support each other. And the item of hope, I want to say, I have a family member or a few family members who are reluctant to get the vaccine because the thing they said is that they don't feel comfortable. And I was like, well, what can I, I work for the network. What can I do to help you feel more comfortable? And it just took time. I think naming the questions, trying to help them figure out what are the fears that they have. What are the mistruths that you've had? Just name them. And I could show research and say, well, this isn't true. Like your shellfish allergy isn't going to be impacted by this, or whatever condition it is in your life. Talk to your doctor, see if you're a viable candidate to receive the vaccine. And once that information was received, yes, they did it, and then they felt fine. And so I think one of the other things we know from research is that people are more likely to get a vaccination when they've talked to someone who's also had one, and especially in closely knit immigrant communities and Black, Indigenous people of color communities, knowing that you have a trusted voice, someone who looks like you, speaks like you, thinks on your behalf, thinks for you, thinks the best for you, not on your behalf, but thinks wants the best for you, has done this, is more encouraging than just hearing it from, someone on the news or Dr. Fauci or whomever. And so the more we can lift up stories of people who have taken the step for their public health, for their health, and for the health of their community is important. This isn't ending on hope, but it is good information. I was talking to my husband and one of his colleagues. Her husband recently got his second shot, and his parents are in an assisted living facility. And they had a policy that if you're going to go in, you have to show a negative test. And he's like, but I got both tests. I got both shots. Like, I don't need that. And they were like, no, the policy is that you have to have a negative test. So he got his test and he came back positive, even though he'd had both shots for COVID. So the vaccine is working, and that he was not sick. He did not show signs or symptoms of it. His health wasn't impaired, but he was carrying vaccine. There was virus in him, and had he gone into the nursing facility, he would have impacted his parents, potentially others in staff. So please do what you can to abide by guidelines. Get the vaccine because it does protect you, but it doesn't necessarily protect everyone around you. And so I think we just need to have that sense of consciousness, again, thinking what's best for the community and not just for ourselves.
Yeah. Well, thank y'all again for being here. I'm going to flash up your emails just so everybody has that if you're watching this. And next week, we're going to be talking a little bit about the science. You ended on a good note, because next week we are going to be discussing the science behind it, all about the vaccine, like Bertram was saying. And Bertram's going to be back with us, along with Dr. Ulysses Burley. Is that correct?
Yes.
So they are going to be with us next week to kind of continue our little COVID series. But we're so grateful for the work that y'all do. And thank y'all so much. We're very blessed to have y'all here. And as a member of the queer community, I am very grateful for y'all's work in HIV, and very grateful for that. Very impactful. So, and Destiny, always good to be with you, even though I see you all the time.
Right? I know, right? I'm sorry that I didn't miss you earlier, but
that's all right. That's all right. But again, thank y'all so much for being with us. And until next week, we'll see you same time, same place next week. So see you next week.
Thank you. Appreciate y'all.
Yes, appreciate you too.